I was 25, freshly graduated, and standing at a crossroads in my life. My degree was in hand, but the future ahead of me felt like an empty canvas. Some of my friends had already found jobs, some were engaged, and a few had even gone abroad. I, on the other hand, sat most days in my room with books still piled on my desk, wondering when life would finally begin for me. It wasn't that I didn't have dreams. I wanted a career, independence, and maybe a love story of my own someday, but the world seemed too vast, and I felt too small to take that first step. It was on one of those ordinary afternoons that my mother's old friend came to visit. She was around 40, elegant in her own way, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that instantly filled the room. She greeted my mother warmly, and then her eyes turned toward me. I stood quietly near the dining table, a cup of tea in my hands, when she smiled at me as if she had known me all her life. "You must be Sophia," she said, her tone gentle but curious. I nodded, returning a polite smile. Something about the way she looked at me made me feel seen, as though I wasn't just another young girl drifting between studies and uncertainty. She asked me questions about my education, my plans, my interests, and for the first time in weeks, I felt myself opening up, talking freely. My mother seemed surprised too, watching how easily her friend drew me out of my shell. Before leaving, she insisted that we visit her house sometime soon. She said it with such warmth that it didn't feel like a formality. A few days later, my mother and I accepted her invitation. I had no idea that stepping into that house would set my life on an entirely new course. Her home was beautiful, spacious, modern, and filled with the quiet signs of success. Yet what struck me most wasn't the furniture or the decor, but the woman who came to greet us. She was her daughter, Emma. Emma was nothing like I had imagined. She was 30, but her presence carried a maturity and strength far beyond her age. Dressed simply yet so gracefully, she radiated an aura of quiet power. Later I learned she was the CEO of a company, but in that moment, she was just Emma, the woman whose eyes met mine with kindness, curiosity, and something I couldn't quite name. She joined us for tea, and though she spoke with my mother, her gaze often drifted back to me. When she finally addressed me directly, it felt as though the room had narrowed to just the two of us. She asked about my studies, about the kind of work I wanted, and she listened in a way that made me feel important, as if my words had weight. I found myself watching her hands as she spoke, graceful yet strong, and the ease in her voice when she laughed. She wasn't only intelligent, she was warm, approachable, and had a softness in her smile that made me feel comfortable despite the difference in our worlds. That evening, as we left their house, my mother kept talking about old memories with her friend, but my thoughts lingered on Emma. There was something about her that stirred the quiet corners of my heart, something I couldn't name then, that I didn't know it at that moment, but that first meeting was the beginning of everything. The beginning of change, of discovery, of love. Looking back now, I realize that the day Emma walked into my life, fate had already chosen a path for me, one I never imagined I would take. I didn't know that day would change my whole life. A week after our first meeting, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was Emma. Her voice was calm but carried that kind of authority which made me straighten up instantly, even though I was just lying in bed at the time. "Sophia," she said, "I remember you mentioned you were looking for a job. Why don't you visit my office tomorrow? I think I might have something for you." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Me in her office? The thought was both exciting and terrifying. I agreed instantly, though my heart thudded in my chest long after the call ended. The next morning, I dressed more carefully than usual, trying to look professional yet not overdressed. I remember staring at myself in the mirror, wondering if she would see me as capable, or just as her mother's friend's daughter, who was still uncertain about her future. When I arrived at her company, I was stunned. The building was tall, with glass windows that reflected the morning sun, and people moved in and out with purposeful strides. Inside, everything felt alive: the hum of phones, the quiet tapping of keyboards, the low murmur of meetings happening in distant rooms. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had stepped into a world where real things happened, where decisions could change lives, and in the middle of that world stood Emma. She greeted me at the entrance with a smile that was professional, but also carried that familiar warmth I had felt the first day. She looked different here, sharper, more powerful, her presence commanding respect from everyone around her. Yet when she spoke to me, her tone softened. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Come, let me show you around." As we walked through the halls, I noticed how employees straightened at her presence, how every pair of eyes seemed to acknowledge her authority. Yet, she never looked down on anyone. She nodded, smiled, exchanged small words with her staff. It made me admire her even more, this balance of strength and kindness that defined her. Finally, she brought me into her office. It was spacious, but not overwhelming, decorated with simplicity. A large window opened up to the city below, and on her desk, everything was placed with neat precision. She gestured for me to sit. "I need someone I can trust with a few projects," she said, sliding a folder across the desk toward me. "You're just starting, so I'll guide you. Don't worry, you'll learn quickly." Her confidence in me, a girl she had only recently met, left me speechless. I opened the folder, scanning the papers, though truthfully, my mind was half distracted by her presence so close to me. She leaned forward at one point to explain a detail, and I caught the subtle scent of her perfume, soft, elegant, and entirely her. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to focus. The hours passed quickly. She showed me the basics, encouraged me when I hesitated, and even when I made small mistakes, she didn't scold me. Instead, she reassured me with a calm voice, "It's all right." That's how we learn. Somewhere between the instructions and the occasional shared smile, I felt something shift. She wasn't just a boss to me. She wasn't even just Emma, the CEO. She was becoming someone whose approval mattered, whose encouragement warmed me in ways I didn't want to name yet. During lunch, she surprised me by asking me to join her instead of letting me eat alone. We sat in her office, sharing food and laughter. She asked about my family, my childhood dreams, even little things like my favorite books. The conversation flowed so naturally that for a while, I forgot she was my boss at all. Later that afternoon, as I was organizing some files, I felt her eyes on me. When I looked up, she quickly glanced away, but not before I caught that flicker, something tender, something that mirrored the confusion I was feeling inside. I lowered my gaze, my cheeks warm, my heart racing. By the end of the day, when I finally gathered my things to leave, she walked me to the door herself. "You did well today, Sophia," she said softly. "I'm glad you're here." Her words stayed with me all evening. It wasn't just encouragement, it felt personal, as though beneath the professional layer, there was something more. Something waiting unspoken. As I lay in bed that night, I replayed every glance, every smile, every word we had shared. I didn't know what it all meant yet, but I knew one thing: being near her made me feel alive, and I wanted more of it. What began as a job invitation was quietly becoming something else, something deeper, something neither of us had dared to name. The weeks that followed felt like a transformation, not just in my career but in myself. Emma had a way of guiding me that was unlike anyone else. She was patient when I stumbled, encouraging when I doubted myself, and strict only when she knew I could do better. Whenever she spoke to me, I felt as if I was the only person in the room. That feeling of being seen, truly seen, was something I hadn't experienced before. Most people looked at me and saw an ordinary girl, just starting out, with nothing remarkable to offer. But Emma, she looked at me as if I mattered, as if there was something in me worth nurturing. We developed small rituals together. Every afternoon, instead of letting me eat alone at my desk, she would invite me into her office for lunch. Sometimes it was simple, sandwiches ordered in, or salads. Other times, she would surprise me with something homemade. "I don't get much time to cook," she admitted once, "but when I do, it feels grounding." I cherish those lunches. They weren't just meals, they were conversations that drew us closer. She asked me about my life in a way that wasn't small talk. She wanted to know my dreams, my fears, what kept me awake at night. And in turn, she shared parts of herself that felt private, the challenges of running a company at a young age, the loneliness of success, the pressure of expectations. Sometimes, we stayed late at the office. The others would leave, the lights would dim, and it would just be the two of us, sitting across from each other with files spread out on the table. I'd often get lost in the sound of her voice as she explained something to me, or the way her eyes softened whenever they met mine. In those moments, the world outside seemed to fall away. One evening, after a particularly demanding week, I reached my breaking point. A project had gone wrong, I had misfiled some important data, and it caused delays. Though no one scolded me, the weight of the mistake sat heavy on my shoulders. By the time I walked into Emma's office, my hands were trembling, my throat tight with unshed tears. She looked up from her desk and immediately noticed. "Sophia," she said gently, "what's wrong?" That was all it took for my control to collapse. I sank into the chair across from her, my voice breaking as I tried to explain. I messed everything up. I'm not good enough for this. Maybe I was never meant to be here. Before I could finish, she was at my side. She knelt beside me, her hand resting lightly on mine, her eyes full of concern. "Hey, don't say that. Everyone makes mistakes, Sophia. Even me." I shook my head, tears slipping down my cheeks. "But you trusted me." "And I." Her hand moved to my arm, a steadying touch. "I didn't bring you here because I thought you'd be perfect. I brought you here because I saw something in you. And I still see it. Don't ever doubt that." Her words broke something open inside me. I covered my face with my hands, trying to hide my tears, but then I felt her arms wrap around me. She pulled me into a hug, firm yet gentle, steady and warm. The world seemed to still in that embrace. I could hear her heartbeat against my ear, steady and calm, as if it were reminding me to breathe. My hands hesitated, then slowly, I wrapped my arms around her too. The hug lingered longer than it should have. Neither of us pulled away. There was something unspoken in the silence between us, something that hummed in the air like electricity. When she finally loosened her hold, our faces were close, too close. I could see the tiny flecks of gold in her brown eyes, the faint curve of her lips, the warmth of her breath brushing against my skin. I didn't plan what happened next. My gaze dropped to her mouth, just for a second, and before I could look away, she leaned in, or maybe I did. I'll never know who moved first. But then her lips brushed mine. It was soft, almost hesitant, like a secret whispered in the dark. Just a touch, a fleeting kiss, yet it felt as if the ground had shifted beneath me. My breath caught, my heart raced, and when she pulled back slightly, I could still feel the imprint of her lips lingering on mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, our eyes searching, questioning, but also confessing without words. "I'm sorry," she whispered, as if she had crossed a line. But I shook my head, my voice trembling. "Don't be." And in that fragile, delicate silence, I knew something had changed between us. It wasn't just admiration or friendship or even gratitude anymore. It was something deeper, something neither of us could ignore. That night, as I lay awake replaying the moment over and over, I realized the truth I had been afraid to admit. I was falling in love with Emma. And from the way she had kissed me, however softly, however fleetingly, I knew she was falling too. After that first kiss, nothing between us was the same, yet everything on the surface remained unchanged. At the office, she was still my boss and I was still her employee. We worked side by side, exchanged files, discussed projects, and led meetings as if nothing had happened. But beneath the surface, a current pulled us closer each day, a quiet understanding that neither of us dared to name aloud. Our work soon required travel. Emma had always been hands-on with her international clients, and now that I was assisting her, she wanted me to join. "It'll be a good experience for you," she said casually, but the way her eyes lingered on me made me think there was more behind the invitation. The first trip was to Dubai. I still remember stepping off the plane, the warm evening air brushing against my face, the city lights glittering like jewels across the skyline. Emma walked beside me through the bustling airport, calm and confident as always, but when our shoulders brushed, a shiver ran through me. Our hotel was luxurious, overlooking the sea. At the reception, they gave us adjoining rooms, and though it was perfectly normal, the knowledge that only a thin wall separated us made my heart flutter. During the day, we attended meetings, visited clients, and handled business matters. But the evenings, those were ours. One night, she suggested we go for a walk by the beach. The sand was cool beneath my feet, the waves lapping softly against the shore, and the city's lights shimmered in the distance. We walked in silence for a while, the breeze tangling my hair. Then she reached out, almost instinctively, and tucked a strand behind my ear. Her fingers lingered for a second longer than necessary, and when I looked at her, our eyes locked in the dim glow of the street lamps. "Are you happy here, Sophia?" she asked suddenly. I nodded. "More than I've ever been." Her smile was soft, but her gaze was searching, as though she wanted to say more, but held it back. We kept walking, our hands brushing now and then until, finally, she took mine in hers. It was simple, quiet, but it sent a rush of warmth through me that no city lights could match. That night, outside under the vast sky, she leaned closer, and our lips met again. It wasn't hurried or uncertain this time. It was gentle, deliberate, and full of care. Her hand cupped my cheek, her thumb brushing lightly against my skin as she kissed me. It was as if the whole world had gone silent, leaving only us suspended in that moment. We returned to the hotel hand in hand, and though we parted at our doors, my heart knew something irreversible had happened. From that trip onward, travel became our secret sanctuary. Paris, London, Singapore, each place carried memories that only we shared. In Paris, we had dinner by candlelight in a quiet little restaurant tucked away on a cobblestone street. I watched the flicker of the flame dance across her face, and for the first time, I understood what people meant when they said love makes someone glow. In London, we spent an afternoon shopping. She teased me when I hesitated over a dress, insisting I try it on. "You'll look beautiful in it," she said, her voice leaving no room for doubt. When I stepped out wearing it, her eyes lingered in a way that made my cheeks burn, and yet I felt like the most beautiful girl in the world. In Singapore, after a long day of meetings, we sat by the hotel window, looking out at the skyline lit with neon lights. We didn't speak much, just shared the silence, sipping tea, our shoulders pressed together. At one point, she took my hand and whispered, "You calm me, Sophia. You make me forget the noise." Those moments weren't grand gestures. They weren't about expensive dinners or luxurious hotels. They were about the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't noticing, the way her laughter made me laugh too, the way her hand would always find mine as if it belonged there. Of course, there were kisses, many of them. Soft ones shared in the quiet corners of airports, playful ones when she caught me smiling too much at her, long ones in hotel rooms when the world outside didn't exist. They weren't rushed or reckless. They were full of care, full of the unspoken truth that what we shared wasn't fleeting, it was real. One night, in a small town outside Rome, we sat on a terrace overlooking the hills. The air smelled of jasmine, and the stars stretched endlessly above us. She spoke about her fears then, how she worried about disappointing her family, how being a woman in her position had never been easy, how sometimes she felt she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. I listened quietly, holding her hand, wishing I could take that weight from her. When she finished, I leaned in and kissed her gently. "You don't have to carry everything alone," I whispered. "I'm here." She smiled then, her eyes glistening. "That's what I'm afraid of," she admitted softly. "That I'll need you more than I should." Her confession struck something deep within me. Because the truth was, I already needed her too. More than a boss, more than a friend, she had become the person I couldn't imagine my life without. As we sat there under the stars, her hand in mine, I realized something that both terrified and exhilarated me. I wasn't just falling in love with Emma. "She comes from nothing," she continued, her glare flicking toward me as if I weren't even standing there. "Her family is poor, unsuitable, not equal to us. Do you really think she can stand beside you in society? Do you think people will accept this?" I felt the blood drain from my face, shame and anger warring inside me. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but my voice caught in my throat. Before I could, Emma stepped forward, her tone firm. "Enough, Mama. Don't speak about her like that." But her mother was relentless. "I raised you better than this. Do you know what people will say? What this will do to your company, your future. You will ruin yourself for her. The room felt heavy, suffocating. Emma's jaw clenched, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. She turned to me briefly, and in her eyes, I saw the war raging inside her, the love she felt for me battling against the duty she felt toward her mother. For days after that confrontation, Emma was quieter. At work, she functioned as usual, but I could feel the distance creeping in. At night, when we sat together, she would hold me tightly but say little. I knew she was torn, trapped between the two worlds she loved. One night, as we sat side by side, I finally whispered, "Emma, if this costs you too much, if I'm the reason you're losing your family." She silenced me with a kiss, tender but desperate. When she pulled back, her voice broke. "Don't say that, Sophia. Don't ever say that. I love you. That's all that matters." But her eyes betrayed the pain she carried. Reality had crashed into our dream. The wedding we had begun to imagine now seemed like a battlefield. Every step forward met with her mother's disapproval. My family's quiet acceptance felt small compared to the storm her mother had unleashed. Still, in the quiet moments, when her hand found mine under the table, when her lips brushed my forehead before sleep, I held on to hope. Because love like ours wasn't fragile. It was strong, even if the world refused to see it. But deep down I knew, the fight had only begun. The days after Emma's mother's outburst were heavy, like storm clouds that refused to clear. She didn't stop at words. She began weaving her disapproval into every corner of Emma's life. Suddenly, family gatherings became interrogations. Relatives called, urging Emma to reconsider, whispering about reputation and respectability. Even in business circles, her mother planted quiet doubts, subtle remarks about how Emma was distracted lately, or how her choices weren't befitting a woman of her status. I watched Emma weather it all with a composed face, but when the doors closed and it was just the two of us, the mask slipped. One night, she came to me past midnight, slipping into my small apartment like a fugitive. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling. I pulled her inside, heartbreaking at the sight of her. "She won't stop," she whispered, collapsing into my arms. "She's calling investors, Sophia. She's telling them I'm unstable, that I've lost control." I held her close, stroking her hair. Guilt burned in my chest. "This is because of me." "Emma," I whispered, tears rising. Maybe I'm not worth this. I don't want you to lose your family, your company, everything you've worked for, just because of me." She pulled back sharply, her eyes blazing through her tears. "Don't you dare say that. Don't you ever say that." Her voice cracked, but her conviction didn't. "I'd rather lose the world than lose you." Her words shattered me. I pressed my forehead against hers, sobbing softly. "But I don't want you to lose your family because of me." She cupped my face with both hands, forcing me to look into her eyes. "Listen to me. You are not the reason for my suffering. They are. Their prejudice. Their pride. Their obsession with appearances. Don't ever take their guilt and make it yours." We clung to each other in the silence that followed, two women fighting a world that refused to understand. From then on, our love lived in the shadows. We met secretly late-night drives where we parked by the river, sitting in silence just to feel safe in each other's presence. Holding hands in the dark, our fingers intertwined like lifelines. Sometimes we'd walk in quiet streets at odd hours, laughing softly, knowing no one was watching. But even in those moments of stolen happiness, the weight of fear never left us. A single phone call from her mother, a single rumor whispered too loudly, could undo everything. One evening, after a particularly vicious confrontation with her mother, Emma showed up at my place again. Her mascara was smudged, her voice hoarse. She sank onto my couch, burying her face in her hands. "She said I was betraying her," Emma choked out. "That I was choosing you over blood. She said she'd rather not have a daughter at all than see me with you." The words hit me like a knife. My chest tightened, my breath catching. I knelt in front of her, gently prying her hands away from her face. "Emma," my voice trembled. "If staying with me means losing your mother, maybe I should let you go." Her eyes shot up, wild with pain. "Don't say that. Sophia, You're my heart. Do you understand? Without you, I'd be nothing but a hollow shell doing what she tells me to. I need you. I want you. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and instinctively, I wrapped my arms around her. We cried together, quiet, aching sobs that soaked into each other's skin. That night, I realized our love wasn't just passion or tenderness. It was survival. We became warriors in our own small ways. When the world turned its back, we built a secret universe where love was enough. In whispered phone calls at 3 a.m., in quick embraces in empty corridors at work, in the letters she sometimes left hidden in my bag, I love you. Don't forget it. We found strength. But the cracks were there. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of fighting a war she didn't ask for. I could feel the guilt gnawing at me, whispering that maybe, no matter how much she loved me, I was costing her too much. And yet, every time those doubts threatened to consume me, Emma's hand would find mine, firm and steady. Every time I questioned our future, she would kiss me softly, as though sealing a promise. One night, as we sat in my darkened room, her head resting on my shoulder, I whispered the fear I'd never voiced aloud. Emma, what if we don't make it? She lifted her head, her eyes meeting mine in the faint glow of the streetlight outside. Her lips brushed mine before she answered, her voice steady but tender. Then I'll spend every day fighting until we do. Her words silenced every doubt in me. In that moment, I knew, whatever the world tried to take from us, our love would not break. It might bend. It might bleed. But it would not break. The breaking point came quietly, like the hush before a storm. Emma sat across from me in my small kitchen, her coffee untouched, her hands trembling just slightly as she stared at the floor. I knew something had shifted in her. I could feel it in the heaviness of the air between us. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes, red from sleepless nights, held a clarity I hadn't seen in months. She's never going to agree, she said softly. No matter how much I plead, no matter how many tears I shed, my mother will never accept us. The words should have crushed me. Instead, they carried a strange sense of relief, as though we had finally stopped circling an endless maze. Emma reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. Her grip was firm, resolute. I've realized something, Sophia. I can't keep living for her expectations. I can't keep suffocating just to protect her pride. If I keep waiting for her blessing, I'll lose you and myself. My throat tightened. Emma, I'm leaving, she whispered. I'm moving in with you. The certainty in her voice sent shivers through me. It wasn't just a declaration, it was defiance, courage, and love, all woven into one. That evening, I stood with her in her bedroom, watching as she folded her life into a few suitcases. The walls were lined with childhood photographs, family portraits, awards she had earned, fragments of a world that had shaped her but no longer defined her. She paused at her dresser, holding a framed picture of her and her mother. For a moment, her face crumbled, tears glistening in her eyes. My instinct was to rush forward, to tell her she didn't have to do this, that I would understand if she stayed. But then she placed the frame down gently, her shoulders squaring as if she had just shed the last chain that bound her. Memories will stay, she murmured, almost to herself. But I need to start building new ones with you. I wanted to tell her how proud I was, how terrified I was, how undeserving I sometimes felt of a love so brave. But my voice failed me, so I just held her hand as she zipped the last suitcase shut. The house was eerily silent when we walked out. No footsteps chasing after her, no desperate pleas for her to stop. Just silence, the kind that felt final. We loaded her suitcases into my small car. She slid into the passenger seat, exhaling shakily, as though with every mile we drove away, a weight lifted from her chest. When we reached my apartment, she looked around at the modest space that had always felt too small for two people. But instead of hesitation, her face lit with something else, freedom. She set her bags down and turned to me. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, overwhelmed by what she had done. Then she whispered, voice trembling but sure. I chose you, Sophia. Over the world, over everything. I chose you. And in that moment, I saw her not just as the woman I loved, but as the bravest soul I had ever known. Emma had defied her family, her society, her own fears, just to stand beside me. She chose me. And in doing so, she showed me what true love really meant. For a short while, it felt as though we had finally outrun the storm. Emma and I built a rhythm, sharing breakfasts in my tiny kitchen, falling asleep tangled in each other's arms, whispering plans about the future. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And then, the storm found us again. Emma's mother did not just cut ties, she made sure her absence was felt. Calls stopped, family gatherings went on without her, and the silence of her old home became deafening. But the cruelty went further. One morning, Emma came home pale, her briefcase hanging loosely in her hand. I rushed to her, worry clawing at me. "They want me to resign," she said flatly. "The board, my mother, still holds influence. She's convinced them that my relationship with you is a disgrace. They said I have until the end of the week to make a decision." The weight of her words sank into me like stone. This was not just love we were risking anymore. This was her career, her years of hard work, the life she had built with such determination. "Emma," my voice cracked, "I can't let you lose everything because of me." But her eyes, burning with the same fire that had carried her out of her mother's house, met mine. "I'd rather lose my title, my wealth, even my name, than lose you," she whispered. "What good is all of it if I can't share it with the person I love?" Tears blurred my vision as she pulled me into her arms. And in that embrace, I understood. She wasn't just choosing me, she was letting go of everything else. She gave up her status, her security, the comfort of privilege, for love. For us. In that moment, guilt melted into gratitude, fear into fierce devotion. I held her tighter, whispering through tears. She didn't just love me, she gave up her whole world for me. We had nothing certain ahead, no wealth, no family blessings, no guarantees. But as I rested my head against her chest, I knew we had something far greater. In her arms, I found not just love, but home.